Welcome to Wales Tech Week 2021. Thank you to our partners. Enjoy the session.
Bore da, croeso cynnes iawn. Thank you very much. Great to see you here. Welcome to Wales Tech Week and welcome to this session. My name's Tom Crick. I'm Professor of Digital Education and Policy at Swansea University and I'm the chair for this session. We've got an excellent panel as we'll shortly come on to, and I'll hand over to each of my colleagues to introduce themselves shortly. And as you can see from the brief for this session, we're looking at transforming the public sector. So we're looking at digital transformation in the public sector, obviously a key area for Wales, a key area and scrutiny kind of nationally and internationally. And again, I think we're gonna cover a wide range of topics across this session, all the way from education and skills through to kind of trust and leadership, through to data and infrastructure, and essentially how we can think about in this wider context around designing citizen-centered digital public services. So partly recognizing some of the challenges, but I think particularly focusing on the opportunities for Wales as we go forward, particularly in the context of having a new Welsh Government elected, a new Senedd Cymru elected from May 2021. So we have 5 years of a new government with digital placed at the heart of many of their kind of aspirations and ambitions. And also that links back to the publication of the Welsh Government's digital strategy, which was published in March 2021. So I think we recognise that some of the things we're going to discuss in this session today will link back to a lot of the themes and events that have come up across Wales Tech Week, and actually certainly aren't just specifically focused on the public sector. I think it recognises actually the huge importance and the interaction with the private sector, and obviously that also links back to thinking about research and innovation, thinking around the kind of societal and cultural aspects of this, clearly recognising the economic ambitions of Wales, and obviously recognising kind of where we are now and where we'd like to be in the next 18 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. So a very broad and open scope for today's session. I think we are gonna we've got a few kind of key themes we want to pick up. We're very, very keen to have comments and questions from the audience as well as we go through the session. I'll be kind of keeping an eye on the stuff that's coming in, and I'll fold it into the discussion as we go through. So please feel free to send stuff, and I'm very keen to get a bit of participation and engagement from our listeners and from our audience. But now I'll hand over to each of my panelists in turn, just to give a brief introduction to themselves, who they are, what they do, and I think that will kind of then lead us naturally into having a bit of a conversation about some of the kind of key priorities around digital transformation. So thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn. I'll hand over first to Glyn Jones.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Tom. Thanks very much, Tom. Diolch am y cyfle i siarad heddiw. Thanks for the invitation to be here today. So I'm Glyn Jones. I'm Chief Digital Officer in Welsh Government. So that means I'm responsible for our own IT services, our own digital services in terms of the profession that we have in Welsh Government, the DDAP profession, but also in advising ministers on digital strategy and digital policy and working with the colleagues around the virtual table today. So it's really good to be able to talk today about the developments we've seen over the past year and what we hope to do over the years ahead. It's a really exciting time in Wales on digital, and I think we've seen a big transformation in thinking on this in the last couple of years, and in a way the momentum of the pandemic has just kept that going. So we know that people are used to receiving services online, they're working online, children are learning online. We've seen incredible services developed at pace, such as the video consultation for GPs, test, trace and protect. And I think we all saw how schools adapted between the first and second lockdowns in terms of the quality of that online learning. So with all that in mind, Lee Waters, as the Deputy Minister for Economy and Transport at the time, a passionate advocate for digital thinking over many years before he even became a minister, really wanted to press forward with work to raise the bar in terms of digital public services in Wales. We wanted to make sure we kept that momentum going. So as Tom said, we published a digital strategy in March, which with Lee coming back in as the Minister with responsibility for digital, is named in the programme for government as one of the commitments for the next Senedd term. We also in December committed funding for the Centre for Digital Public Services, and I won't spoil Sally's talk by talking too much about that, but it's a really exciting development for Wales to have such a digitally focused body. And the appointment of Sam, who will also talk in a minute, advertising for a Chief Digital Officer for Health, and the establishment of a new Digital Health and Care Wales body means we're in a really good place in terms of setting the digital agenda for the next few years in Wales. And this strategy is about our ambition to produce modern, efficient and streamlined public services, stimulating innovation in our economy and supporting our outcomes for future generations. And what we want is public services that are designed around what users actually need, not just what organisations think they need, to put user-centred design at the heart of our policy development and delivery, to take a collaborative and agile approach to delivering our commitments. And part of that is leadership, and I'm sure Sally and Sam will talk a bit more about that, but really getting out there and understanding what we mean by digital, what we mean by putting citizens at the heart of service design, how that can help people understand problems and improve outcomes, which is what we want at the end of the day, whether they wish to access services online or not. How embracing and adopting technology can free up resources, and that's not to save jobs, but to make sure we're using people in the best way possible to support people with complex needs and to give people the support they need, rather than spending time on other things. And ensuring we've got a clear understanding across the public sector about the importance of data. From some of the more sort of structural stuff about data management and data standards and how that can help us deliver better services, towards the impact data can have in terms of making decisions and driving forward innovation. So we published a strategy. We want to move now to making sure the delivery plan has got some really good key actions that will make a difference to the services our citizens receive, that will make a difference to the digital economy. And it'll be really good today to talk more about any ideas people have about those actions, about the direction we're going. The key thing about all of this for us is doing it in a collaborative way. That's why we've appointed a Chief Digital Officer for local government, why we're advertising a Chief Digital Officer for Health, and why we have Sally as Chief Executive of the Centre for Digital Public Services. Our government has always been about a one public service approach to things, about joining up, working together, co-production, and this has given us a real leadership ecosystem to do this on the digital agenda. Before I pass on, I'll just finally mention the Welsh language, given I started with a bit of Welsh. This is a real great opportunity for us in Wales to make a mark. But also for technology and digital to support our ambitions on the Welsh language. So from a public service point of view, this means embedding Welsh and bilingual service design from the start of thinking, not seeing it as an afterthought or a translation or a compliance issue. From a technology side, the exciting things we've got underway in terms of multilingual technology components, which will be open for people to reuse, so that public and private sector can give Welsh speakers the support they need to use Welsh in every aspect of their lives. So that's all I'll say for now. I'll pass back to you, Tom. Diolch yn fawr am y cyfle i siarad heddiw.
Thanks, Glyn. And obviously, there's a number of big themes we're going to pick up as we go through the discussion in this panel session today. But first, I'll hand over to Sally Meecham. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Glyn. Yes, hello, I'm Sally Meecham, the Interim Chief Exec for Centre for Digital Public Services. I have just led the keynote address to start this event, so if you're following that and you're thinking she's just repeating herself, I do apologise, and I'll do it quite quickly. I do actually welcome the opportunity to get my minister's name right, because I called him Lee Water, and I'm going to call him Lee Waters, so I'm very glad that I got a second chance. So welcome everybody. Just a brief background around CDPS, I'll call it that, it'll be easier, or the centre. So about 2.5 years ago, Lee Waters did get together a group of digital experts to produce a paper called System Reboot that basically set a set of challenges back to the Welsh public sector. In summary, it was saying we need to do more, we need to do it quicker, we need to think about the user, we need to think about how we design and deliver user-led services, and we need to do more with our leadership. So I picked up that document and ran a discovery to prove or disprove that there was a problem, there were challenges in Wales with regards to digital transformation. We set out across the whole of the Welsh public sector, so local authority, health, arm's length thanks bodies, but we also included organisations like housing, third sector and blue light, because services quite often start and deliver in different places, and there's a number of organisations that are responsible for the design and delivery of public services across Wales. So we then did a survey, had a great response, but basically wanted to try and get the evidence and data about where the barriers were and where the problems were, or if indeed there were any. As it turned out, there were. And the main one was really around leadership. The responses said that they really felt that their leaders either were not interested or were a bit frightened about digital, because everyone's thinking it's technology, and that they were in some cases blocking progression, and they also felt that there wasn't enough future looking about what was coming, what was here now, but also being able to plan your workforce, plan your organisation to deliver in an internet age. Also coming out of that was a sense that Wales was small enough for us to be doing more together, to collaborate more, to look sideways and see how we can join up, and that there was a real lack of digital skills and capability in Wales. And I would say straight off, and this is obviously Tech Week, there's been there's brilliant stuff happening in Wales around technology, but with regards to the skills around user research and content design and service design, they are very, very limited across the Welsh public sector, and we do need them because they're the roles that we're going to need as we move forward. So we then took that to an alpha phase. At this time, we set ourselves up as an arm's length body, so we can work with some sort of independence, so we can represent all the organisations across the Welsh public sector. And we started to actually deliver some work to try to address the problems that we found in the discovery phase. So the discovery phase is what's the problem we're trying to solve. The alpha phase is how do we start to solve those problems. And we looked at how do we demonstrate new ways of working? How do we demonstrate multidisciplinary teams? And what's the subject matter we're going to use to do that? So we got together with Torfaen, Blaen y Gwent and Neath Talbot. We got together in a room and said, what's a common problem we're trying we can solve together? And it was access to adult social care. And we then formed a team. We brought in some digital experts and went through the discovery, what problem we're trying to solve. And we did that with the users of the service. And I think this is where we are trying to promote and push and show actually how you do that. How do you bring the users of the service and the people who are going to deliver the service in the room at the beginning to make sure that you don't then create a monster that you chuck out into the world and say, I hope you can use this. And you say to your operations people, I hope you can operate that. Let's get them all in the room at the same time. Now, one of the reasons why we chose access to adult social care was because that was something that could be very much improved, but also its access, it helps us to look at the components and what we can learn about access to public services full stop. So how do we improve access to all of our public services? How do we ensure that as a user of those services, you have a consistent, informed and simple, easy entry into that service? Also during the alpha phase, we started to deliver to well over 500 leaders now across the different sectors. And really importantly, was board members and also councillors that we were delivering as what is digital? Because that is really the big question. Still goes on. People think it's technology and therefore they're scared of it. They think we're going to be talking code to them. I certainly won't be talking code to anyone, but I will be talking about good organisational design. I will be talking about user-led services. So that's been great and very well received. And we've started off the communities of practice, which is looking for and identifying and help to bring together like-minded people who want to learn and share. And the couple of the groups that have kicked off and have become really successful is one, as Glyn was referring to, ensuring that we're designing services that are bilingual, that are take the Welsh language and culture into consideration when you're designing, delivering services. And the one of the groups is Community of Practice for Bilingual Services. They now meet every 2 weeks. It's a really vibrant and an excellent group. And also we have one around from comms as well. So we're kind of building that communities of practice. But really importantly as well, that came out of the survey, the discovery, was that we wanted to have service standards. We wanted a kind of a framework to design and deliver services. And we've iterated those over the past few months with our communities and through knowledge sharing sessions. And this is kind of how we wanted to approach things. How do we do things together, and how do we create a platform where people can share it and collaborate and make something that fits and works for Wales. So as Glyn said, we got funding. We're in this next financial year. We'll be doing lots of that good stuff, showing what good looks like. We're also conducting a landscape review to understand what services are out there. Where can we look across? Where can we join up? There's also a layer with that, as well as what technology is being used. Again, how can we join up services, and how can we have shared platforms? And we will increase the work that we're doing around the skills and capability for the public sector, but as importantly, working with education and all other industries like fintech, etc. How do we ensure a good pipeline of skills and talent into Wales for digital? And how do we collectively big up Wales, because essentially it's actually brilliant at the moment. It's on fire. Digital is great in Wales, and so how do we not build our own, and not just build our own, sorry, but also attract new talent?
Thank you very much, Sally. And now happy to hand over and introduce and let Sam Hall introduce herself. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Sam Hall. I'm the Local Government Chief Digital Officer for Wales. I came on board at the end of last year, so about 7 months into the role, and the newest member of this CDO group. And I've got a small team working across all 22 local authorities in Wales, looking at strategic development to digital, service design, better use of data, digital inclusion, accessibility, automation, cyber, cloud, capability, skills, basically that whole list of things that pretty much everyone in our arena is wrestling with at the moment. My background's totally public sector, so 28 years in the civil service, working in a couple of departments where I was lucky enough to be able to move into the digital world when it was pretty fresh in the early 90s. So I've seen most of the things that have come and gone, those kind of things that stayed, but also those flash in the pan ideas that we had. And I was one of the people that bought the mini disc. We won't talk about that. But I've been able to see lots of the positives come out of the move to digital. And I've been there when big failures happen and we've really struggled. And all of those things are priceless, and they're big learning moments. And I think we're having some of those again now with some of the big technology choices that are being made across government. A couple of years ago, I left the civil service and went to Birmingham City Council to lead on digital data and tech there, which really galvanized for me all that's really important about digital and the things we're talking about today around digital and tech, and what's really important about getting it right, and about setting organizations up to be able to take advantage of what the future brings, things we've not even dreamed up yet, rather than get ourselves in a bit of a hole and not be able to dig ourselves out of it. How do we set ourselves up for the future to take advantage of this stuff that's coming over the hill? And you're so close to people in local government because you're part of the community yourself. And you know that whole families rely on the services provided by the councils you work in. It becomes a very personal fight and a personal role for people in local authority. And I loved working in Birmingham. And Birmingham City Council was just an amazing and vibrant place to live and work. But the best job in Wales was advertised. So I came home when I had the opportunity to do it. And working to support the strategic advancement of digital across all local authorities in Wales is such an important job and a real honour. But it's also a massive challenge. Most people can only name a handful of things their councils do, but actually they run around 1,400 services. That's an immense amount of responsibility and lots of plates to keep spinning. During COVID, this just exploded, as did the need to make more services accessible online. The councils raised their game and did so much good work in the last 14 months. But now we have to build on that, and there's so much more to do. But the impetus and the momentum is certainly there, along with the political support and strong leadership. So part of that leadership is being part of the CDO ecosystem we built with Sally, Glyn, and our soon-to-be new colleague in health. It's really important that we look across the public sector and learn from each other. We shouldn't be doing things in isolation, and we already have those challenges with there being 22 local authorities making 22 choices. But you see the same with health boards and with other departments, and we need to really learn how we can collaborate more and take advantage of the fact that we're dealing with similar issues a lot of the time, as Glyn and Sally's mentioned, building, designing for Welsh language, and digital inclusion, and lots of all those things. They affect all of us in similar ways. So we need to make sure that there's that clear understanding across Wales, that there's strength in pooling our brain power and our varied experiences to help solve these problems. Also, and kind of finally in my little preamble, is I don't spend any money. So I don't influence the local authorities to use particular companies, particular technology. I don't tell them how to spend their money. It's more about helping and learning to make the right choices for the right reasons at the right time, and really start to understand the requirements of the future and for our citizens, and quite often our whole families. So it's not so much about buying lots of things, it's about making sure we do the right things, and we buy what we need and we build what we need, which is what Sally alluded to earlier as well. So local government is a tough environment with lots of challenges, but you rarely get an opportunity to work closer to the people you're working for, and that really is a privilege. And I've met so many great people working in local authorities in Wales, and they all have the best interest of the citizens at the heart of what they do, but we've still got so much more to do. But Wales has committed to digital improvement and inclusive services. So for someone like me, it's a great time to be working in this field. And just finally, the fact that we have such political backing, and people have put effort into designing this kind of ecosystem where we have everyone involved and everyone at the table, I think is a massive opportunity for Wales to really, really forge ahead in the digital world now. And it's I'm lucky to be one of the people that hopefully can make that happen. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Sam. That's a perfect segue into kind of my opening kind of gambit really for all of you. Just very quickly, I want to say I'm firmly with you on Minidisc being the forgotten platform. I long lament the loss of Minidisc. It was a fantastic platform. Okay, so I mean, off the back of your final kind of comment there, Sam, I think myself and I think there's a lot of other people in this space have long spoken about the kind of promise of digital for Wales. I think we've seen it kind of pervade government policy for the last kind of 5+ years. We talk about its utility and its potential for Wales. So, I mean, do all of you, particularly, if you've been around Wales for a while, or if you've kind of more recently kind of come back in, have we seen a step change in moving from some of that kind of rhetoric and promise into action? Do we start to see real kind of change? Sally, do you want to come in there first, maybe from a centre perspective?
Yes, and the answer is yes. And I think this kind of ecosystem was already being discussed and put into place before COVID hit. So Wales was already saying, and there was very strong ministerial backing, that this is what we're going to do. We're going to set up a Centre for Digital Public Services, and we're going to have these CDO roles. That was already in train. I think that, which was obviously fantastic. There was support in that. I think what COVID showed us is that it took away some of the fear about using the technology. It took away some of the egos about joining up. It really started to kind of smash some existing ways of working. In the keynote, I talk about something that Michael Ogonosky did around online GP consultations, how they very much, he's an Iron Bevan, how they very much had to very quickly move this forward, and some of the rules and some of the risks and some of the governance, and I'm not saying they were like irresponsible, but they had to be moved away because it kind of literally was a life and death situation. So I think that has given us and demonstrated how we can deliver and how we can deliver at pace. And I think that has really helped kind of galvanise the way that we all work together with Glyn and Sam and Ivan, who's sort of covering from health there, is that kind of, this is what we need to do. We've got the strategy. Really importantly, we've got the action plan in it. So let's get it done. So it was already starting to happen. It moved, I think, was given a really good boot through the COVID time. And what's really so I've been in this scene for about 20 years. I've been digital transformation to lots of organizations, big organizations, big roles. What is really different here, and this is the comments that people who come to work for us or people talk about it, is this how we really are properly solidly joined up at this point. The digital strategy knitters us all together. It really does make sure that in order to have a digitally transformed Wales, all these elements, infrastructure, data, and everything need to be joined up. So in summary, we're on the right path. There's a lot of energy, there's money behind it, which is critical, and there's political will behind it, which is also critical. So it just makes it a very exciting time.
Thanks, Sally. Is it, Glyn, from your perspective, obviously you're working in kind of Welsh Government, and how have you seen perhaps the culture and behaviours change around digital as this kind of thing that everyone is talking about?
Yeah, it's definitely we've definitely seen a shift, Tom, and I talked a little bit about that in my preamble about the political shift we've seen. So I don't think this was on the agenda very much before, and I think the system reboot report that Lee Waters produced as backbencher for the government really kicked off this sort of this idea that we needed to raise the bar, and coming in there and bringing some of the ministers with him on that journey, and getting a sort of a collective desire that we wanted to raise the bar to fund a new centre for digital public services. That's a huge step change in our thinking here, to have funded in Alpha a centre to show us what they can do, and then to commit to that with a good budget for this year really highlights the political momentum behind that. And what that's done is by bringing together the digital strategy, which covers the various aspects, and we talk about six missions in our digital strategy: public services, skills, connectivity, inclusion, data, and the digital economy. So that means it's a really truly cross-government agenda. So we and that sort of span off a whole range of activities. So we have a digital economy board taking forward actions around the digital economy. We have the work on public services. There's some stuff on data that I now got much more of a mandate and will for people to change how we're doing things. So it's definitely much clearer part of the narrative. And when we're thinking about our interventions, it's thinking digital first about how we might achieve those outcomes that we want. So I've definitely seen that change over the last Senate term, and I think that we'll just see that expanding over the next few years. And as Sally and Sam already said, that join up across all of us and having those CDOs in place will only help that.
Thanks, Glyn. And Sam, picking up on your point around, I suppose the people are perhaps unaware of the roles and responsibilities of local authorities and local government in delivering kind of frontline services. How have you seen that, particularly from your kind of experience in Birmingham, but also kind of coming back to Wales, about how does the interoperability between the different layers and levels of government? So I think it's hugely positive to have, there's a recognition of these CDO roles and the kind of the importance of having these kind of pioneers and leaders. How have you seen that working across those different types of roles kind of over the recent period, and how that might work going forwards, particularly with the new CDO for health and social care?
So I think there's already a challenge in local authorities in that there are 22 sovereign bodies that make 22 sovereign decisions effectively. So quite often they're already kind of a little bit of a loss of cohesion between authorities, which actually, if we can do something to solve that, will take us in a kind of a big step forward. So things like, using interoperable services so we can swap data to help inform and make decisions, because whereas we might think that those boundaries that are around our local authorities are really nice and clear to see, and there's obviously big walls around Powys and Torfaen and everywhere that no one else crosses, but actually we all move around and we work around Wales. We might live in one authority and work in another one, and our children might go to school in another one, and we might use a health authority in another one. So actually those boundaries are just false. They're just there for administrative and financial purposes. But actually the quality of services across Wales needs to be the same wherever you are in Wales, and they need to be able to be accessed in the same way. And you as a citizen need to be able to understand what you need to do, what's your responsibility in that relationship of using that service. And if they're all different, that makes it really hard. So actually, you know, does someone in Anglesey have a better booking system than someone in Cardiff? And you know, is it easier to book a slot at the local tip in Powys than it is in Pembrokeshire? It shouldn't be. We should have the same. And actually, when we start talking like that, then you start seeing this, the real value of that. So when we're talking about a booking system for, you know, booking you know, going to the tip or a badminton court in a local authority, yeah, we also had to book things like vaccines. That seemed to go really, really well. So haven't we kind of cracked this nut already? And I think there's more of that needs to happen, that kind of cracking that nut for everything, because the services are, you know, a lot of them are interchangeable, and if they're interchangeable, they can be interoperable. And I think there's a lot of value in looking at that. But, you know, I don't think necessarily without having this, the impact of the leadership we've got now and the real push towards that then there would have been an imperative to do that. I think it, and you know, that actually does put a lot of pressure on mine, Sally's, Glyn's, and the new NHS person's shoulders. But actually, that imperative is there because you should have an equity of service wherever you are in Wales, and that's, for me, that's the crux. Is whoever you are, wherever you are, you should have the best quality of service you can because you're a Welsh citizen, which means you kind of rank at the top of the tree for me.
No, thanks, Sam. And I think, I mean, I'm exactly as you described that. You know, I live in one local authority, I work in another. I've had a jab in not where I work, not where I live. So it's kind of interesting thinking around how porous those kind of, you know, and actually invisible many of those kind of constituency and those boundaries are. And again, I think sometimes it can get bogged down in discussions of, well, why don't we have one procurement system or one HR system? But thinking in the context of actually that once for Wales approach. So I think, you know, the examples you gave, I think maybe COVID's a great example around catalyzing thinking around, you know, data sharing and interoperability, I think is a key theme, which I'm sure we're going to come on to, particularly when we talk about data, is how do we change the kind of cultures and behaviors around, I want to design it for my area, and actually, you know, I'm not fussed about what anyone else is doing. I think how do we kind of promote that culture around, yes, you're designing for your, say, local authorities, citizens, but actually there's a wider piece for Wales, and actually people don't just stay in the same place and live, work, study all over Wales, and actually increasingly maybe into England. So we have to think about the kind of the how porous the border is the other side as well. So comments from Sally and Glyn now. I mean, how about managing that, the kind of expectations around some of this stuff? Because I think people get quite frustrated when, you know, they see the potential, like rolling out systems or new services, and they sometimes think it can happen very, very quickly. But actually, you know, obviously it can be very frustrating when things don't work as designed. And how do we kind of explain that, you know, implementing some of these national approaches can be quite challenging. So that kind of citizen and user engagement piece for expectations as well.
Yeah, so I mean, essentially that's one of the founding reasons for the centre to be set up, is that we start to move away from technology first, that we actually really do understand what the problem is. We bring the user and the people who deliver the services in the room at the time we start to look at what the problem is and start to together look at what the solution is. We work with, from the outset, the operations people, the finance people, the policy people, the people. Everybody's going to be involved in the delivery and the continuous improvement of that service. So that, and I've been in this since, I think, 20 years, you don't go into a bunker and design a service with some very good digital and technology people, come out of the bunker, chuck it over the fence to ops. Ops don't know anything about it. They're not ready to be able to implement it. There's been no change program around it. And then when it goes out to the user's like, what is this? I don't understand how to use it. And they have all the calls and all the kind of the feedback. So that still continues to happen, and I find that really upsetting, but it's starting to move away from that, and that is really what we're here to promote and push across Wales. Brilliant stuff already happening in Wales, don't get me wrong, but there's much more we need to do and at more pace, and be able to share that brilliant stuff across Wales. I think we want to get to the point where somebody uses a government service, really, and they might have gone across multiple organisations. The look and feel was the same. They just did it. They come out of it. They go off and do something much more interesting with their day than trying to figure out and work out a public service. And I know from doing this for many years and being in lots of user journey mapping workshops that when services don't work well, it's I mean, I know it myself, we all probably know it ourselves, it's really not just frustrating, but it makes you, it makes you really sad and really angry, and all these feelings are just really unnecessary. We're here to serve the people. We need to make sure we give the people what they need, really simply, and without friction. So in order to avoid that, as I said, bring the people in the room with the people who are delivering it and your suppliers. I think it's one thing that's really important is really see your suppliers as part of the structure, the multidisciplinary team. They've all got skills. The people within the public sector are subject matter experts. We're digital experts. Let's make sure we pull that and bring that together to avoid that situation where there's big, great technology procurements going out there and you turn around and say, well, actually, what's the user need there? And kind of tumbleweed comes past.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I don't have much to add to what Sally just said, but I think the part of the challenge has been to sort of get that mindset into our public service leaders, to make sure that we are talking the same language, that we're talking about this idea of putting the user at the center of design, and that it's okay to get things out in an alpha and a beta and iterate, and that we're not necessarily going to get it it's not going to go live and it's going to be perfect. And we have that conversation, and I don't think in Wales we've necessarily been talking that language up until now. So the openness that the centre and others will be working will be really important to get that language across and manage those expectations, but also managing those expectations with citizens then about how we're doing things differently. And I think those are the challenges we need to take to manage those expectations around this.
Thanks all. I mean, there's some really important themes and threads as we go through. And again, it's that it's from aspiration and kind of policy and declaration into delivering things and changing people's lives and making their lives easier so they can access services. And I suppose the government or various layers of government can successfully support people in doing what they need to do. You've all mentioned kind of in your opening preamble, either explicitly or implicitly, the role of data in your roles, and actually the importance of data. I think Sam's kind of comment around COVID has made that really, really clear, particularly from a health and social care perspective, but also the ability to make decisions and get insight from data, in a real-time context, but more generally around how governments and politicians and policymakers are able to effectively use data to make the right decisions. I'm kind of keen to hear some sort of wider thinking around where you've seen that change over the recent period in Wales, and where we see kind of major initiatives or major opportunities kind of coming ahead. Glyn, do you want to come in there first?
Yeah, happy to go first. So my background, for those of you who don't know, is in data. I was previously chief statistician, so obviously this is very much a passion of mine. And I think the last year has, in a way, highlighted a lot of what we already knew about data in terms of the public sector. It's really shone a light of the value of data in helping us make decisions, really important, life-changing decisions over the past year, and how important it is to get it right and to make sure that we have the right data in place and the right people are getting access to it at the right time. So a lot of this is kind of boring stuff, but I think it's important. And again, it's a conversation we've not really had across the public sector up till now. And that's about things like data standards and how we manage our data. So at the moment, we don't have clear data standards for Wales, and I would really like to think about how we can adopt data standards, or push forward new data standards to help us integrate our services. So at the end of the day, integrated digital services will need good data underneath them, and data that will flow. And some of that is fairly basic stuff around using unique identifiers. So just taking a particular example from the pandemic, when the shielding intervention started, we made a clear and conscious decision in Wales that the NHS did a fantastic job bringing together an understanding of who needed to be shielding based on clinical reasons. Once we got that data, we made a clear and conscious decision to allocate unique property reference numbers to it, because we knew if we didn't give the data to the local authorities with an identifier, they would have to do a whole lot of other work to match that data into their systems and to be able to map it and whatever else they need to do. So by doing that, and it added an extra layer onto it, but we gave the authorities the data they needed to be able to integrate back into their systems and really provide that intervention in as quickly as possible. So standards is one thing that I'd really want to make a step change on over the next year. Then there's sort of how we use that data and getting people to understand the value of data to how we can make decisions, and to do so in sort of just consistently using data. And I think we need to take away some of the fear of using data. So a lot of this is your basic stuff, that just use data to support what you're doing as an organization. And we need leaders to understand, chief executives, leadership roles, to understand the art of the possible in terms of using data, and how and what training we need throughout the system to help improve the use of data. Then we can go into the sort of more sophisticated side of this around data science, data-driven innovation, and how we can use all the technology and big data we have now safely and securely to help us really shine a light on what's going on in society and what we can do that will really make a difference. So there's a big continuum of things I would really like to do on data. We've got some proposals around the Data Nation Accelerator, which are being developed by the universities, and we're really excited by that, and we're talking to them about what does that mean in practice. So I think between us all, there's an issue around standards, about making sure the data is organized properly and in the right way. There's an issue around skills, and there's an issue of how we use that then to make decisions. And then on top of all of that is trust and ethics, and making sure we're doing the right things in the right way. So I'll happy for others to come in at that stage.
Thanks, Glyn. I think that there is that big theme around sort of legal, social, ethical, professional issues around kind of data, and particularly around kind of consent and data sharing. I think that's an increasingly visible and kind of sort of societally kind of worrying theme, I suppose. But actually, we need to better engage with citizens to better understand how various layers of government or the public sector use data and how it can be used effectively. I think that's a lot more work needs to be done there. Sally and Sam, did you want to come in on that wider kind of data theme in general?
Yeah, I can. I mean, from a local authority point of view, we've got shed loads of data. I mean, you can imagine, all of the data that we have in local authorities times 22 around Wales. And so, data generally is used to kind of show progress and where we're meeting targets and to show where areas of improvement are needed. But actually, data is just so much more valuable than that in that decision-making piece. And, just to echo, a couple of things that Glyn said. So, I was working in Birmingham when this kicked off, and we didn't have those identifiers with people. And my team spent, we're working overnight when we would get a new shielding list to go in and search all of our own databases to put people in the right order and say, actually, this person is actually who we think it is, and they do live at this address. And it was an extra challenge pretty much daily for months to do that. So, we ended up making our own lists, and then having to do, what Glyn was talking about ourselves to just be able to manage that really well. But across the local authorities in Wales, there's a massive amount of data that would be really, really useful. And there is something around getting people more confident with using it and just adding it into their daily decision making. But I think we we've kind of drifted quite a lot into people thinking that if you've just got masses of data in front of you, you'll be able to make a decision with it. And actually, for me, and learning a lot more about how local authorities work and how the people in them work and the drivers for how they do get things done, it's much more for me about understanding what the problem is and then working backwards from that and understanding what data we need to do that. If we're going to light a fire under data in local authorities and across Wales, then we need to have a problem. We're really good in Wales at picking up a problem and trying to work out how to solve it. So, you know, if we're talking about how to, you know, reduce levels of domestic violence, for instance, if that's the problem we're trying to solve, how do we go about understanding what data is available from local authorities, from the police, from local shelters, all of those things? How do we go about understanding what's in that data landscape that we can pull together, then sit down with the people that can help make those decisions, and then get them more comfortable with that data? So for me, it's backwards. It's not look at all this wonderful data. It's let's have a look at all these horrible problems.
And just really quickly from me, because I'm agreeing violently with Glyn and Sam, and I think Glyn's going to come in with some other points as well. But we have a set of service standards. Number one for us, which separates us from GDS, Government Digital Service, or Scottish Government, is that we meet the needs of the Future Generations Act. Number two is around ensuring we design and deliver bilingual services. But also in that is that we use evidence, data to as evidence to help design and deliver services. So so it's really critical, and it should be tested, because in the past we have designed services, or we've thrown together services based on what we think the user needs, based on what we think the organisation needs, but not really using data in a way to be able to drive good decision making when it comes to designing services. So it's really critical for us, as it's in our 12-point service standards, and all the other stuff around being ethical, and how we ensure that we are just collecting the data we need and not just randomly asking people for all sorts of things just because we probably think that might be useful in the future. Thankfully, GDPR has kind of put a bit of a stop to all that crazy data nonsense. But yeah, so it's integral to the design and delivery of services.
Good. Did you want to come in again there?
Yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about data sharing, because this is something that I've been working on for some time, and trying to again raise the game in terms of data sharing to basically support interventions and outcomes. So we hear a lot about the barriers to this, and I think a lot of it is just an understanding of what is possible and what isn't. And Sally talked about GDPR there. Well, GDPR is actually also an enabler in terms of helping people share data to make sure that people who need it get access to it, to be able to support the outcomes for people. So there is legislation which supports this, and you know, one thing we're really keen to do is to really help public sector organisations understand when they can and can't share data, and how it's really important to actually share data to make people's lives better. And the pandemic has obviously shown that. We've done really important and safe data sharing. The Test, Trace and Protect system in Wales is built on, you know, a collegiate approach to data sharing across health and local government, which has helped make it work. And yeah, we put a lot of effort in over the year to make sure that the data sharing was done right and safe and secure and legal. And we would love to work with organisations to help them understand this better and to feel safe in sharing data. But as you mentioned, Tom, as well, there is a whole dialogue with the public around what we do with data, making sure this is understood and make sure that what our intentions here are for the public good. And you know, we've seen a lot of discussion recently about health data in England. I've noticed the question there, so I'm going to use that as an opportunity to say what we do in Wales on this aspect of academics accessing data. Sam can come in on the local government side if she wants, but yeah, we've had for many years some really really safe, secure and trusted environments to share data for research purposes, and it's been a big part of our agenda to make that data available for researchers in that way. So we have accredited environments which academics and students can access through the Sale Data Bank in Swansea University and a partnership we have in Wales called Administrative Data Research Wales, which brings together academics with government to get access safely to government data, so that public good research is being able to be done on that. And we've worked with local authorities over the years to try and make sure that that data is unlocked for research. We've got more to do, definitely, and we need to make it as easy as we can for local governments to get that data shared. But you're happy to speak, Adam, any time about any particular interest you have. But Sam, I didn't know if you wanted to come back in on that.
Yeah, and it's pretty much what you said. You know, we share, and local authorities feed into the greater kind of data, the data being collected by Welsh Government, and that's there, and that's as open as they can make it. There is, you know, we do feel that there is probably a lot more data that is available within local authorities, but we've not yet kind of really scoped what all of that is and what it's showing us. And there are various reasons for that. Some of it is that it's quite locked in some of our kind of legacy technology, and people are, you know, we're not really sure how to get at it. And then we have to do that thing of understanding, you know, the formats and the structures of it and how we can look at it across to make it comparable and usable with other data from other authorities. So we are just lifting the lid on that. And one of the reasons we're looking at it from that problem solving way is we think that might help us to unlock some of the data that people didn't even really realize was useful and that they had in the authority, but actually is much more useful than anyone had ever thought. So it's early days, really early days around data for my team to get involved in it. But the authorities do what they can currently through the mechanism that Glyn was talking about. But yeah, totally loads more to do.
Thanks both, and thank you for picking up that comment from Adam Weiner, one of my colleagues at Swansea University. I think it's interesting when we think speaking to colleagues at Swansea and across other institutions in Wales and wider, it's kind of interesting around that framing that Sam gave it as around problem-based, you know, these kind of grand challenge type issues, rather than making it either data or technology-based, as you know, as kind of Sally sort of commented on before. Actually, how do we best facilitate working, you know, having the expertise in Welsh universities, and actually that not just being, oh, we can't do that because it's difficult to share data, or, you know, it's about how do we, you know, what kind of funding models kind of best facilitate that. I think Wales has definitely got much better at that. And I think when you think about strategic assets, obviously the Sale Data Bank, you know, Wizard, you know, kind of based across the Welsh institutions, there is this significant capability that cuts across that research, innovation, kind of public policy space. And it's just about how best to signpost that and make it really easy to tap into academic expertise when required. And similarly, to tap into private sector expertise when required, because it isn't just purely a public sector, public services kind of challenge, as we've all kind of covered off over the recent kind of session. I think that data piece is massively important. I wanted to kind of pick up a theme which obviously is quite it's on everyone's kind of lips anyway, particularly from a, say, kind of a critical national infrastructure perspective, but also just the kind of cyber security, cyber resilience kind of challenge. I know we've had some high-profile speakers at Wales Tech Week this week, but I suppose people have probably seen in the mainstream kind of in sort of major news reports around people or actors or nation states kind of probing our infrastructure, probing our public services. We're seeing things like ransomware attacks. We're seeing the kind of major cyber kind of resilience challenges. I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on where that comes from. You know, there's a hard infrastructural perspective around kind of securing software and systems, but also how that sits in a kind of a behaviors, kind of people, cultures piece as well, around making sure people are aware of this in the same way that information governance is important, but actually the kind of cyber security piece as well. Happy to open that up to anyone who wants to kind of to jump in.
Yeah, I don't mind kicking off, Tom. I think, you know, this is clearly really, really important. And as you've mentioned, it is as much about people and culture as it is around technology. So one of the focus has to be around leadership, and we've talked a bit about leadership already this morning. But in terms of cyber, it's making sure that the leaders of organisations and the boards of organisations understand the risks and understand what they need to put in place to mitigate those risks, and that the culture is there, that the funding is put in place to put the technology in place to provide that defence against cyber, and that it's not seen as a sort of a nice to have, that this is actually essential, and that if you don't get it right, it can have critical implications from a financial perspective, but also from a life and limb perspective. So if an NHS organisation gets held up in one of these things, then that has an immediate critical impact on services. So there is a big cultural thing which we are trying to get across, and we're working with Sally about how we can make sure cyber is part of that leadership piece that the centre are leading on. We've held some workshops recently with senior leaders to try and get that across. Obviously, a lot of this is also led by National Cyber Security Centre, and we work really closely with the National Cyber Security Centre. They are developing a new strategy at the moment, and I think that will be an important focus for the UK government, and it's mentioned quite clearly in the integrated review they published recently. And we're developing a cyber action plan for Wales, is mentioned in the digital strategy, that will demonstrate how what we're doing in Wales underneath that wider strategy. But obviously we've also got a huge thriving cyber security centre in Wales as well. We've got lots of expertise here, renowned academic excellence that we can really take advantage of to support organisations on this. And lots of initiatives are already underway. But I think you're absolutely right. From a public sector point of view, we're quite keen to promote this aspect around culture, risk, and the people side of it.
So to pick up, yes, we're working with Glyn on that. I mean, it's critical for us. It's one of our 12 service design standards to ensure that services that has the right level of privacy, security, ethical considerations. To slightly sort of spin it on its head a little bit is that we also want more people to be using online digital services. We want to push people towards that. We know that there is a divide. There's a number of people that are digitally excluded for various reasons across Wales, but one of the main reasons is not always skills or having the kind of kit, but it's around the fear of using online services. And so the more we keep getting these cyber attack stories, the more people like my mum will not do anything online, anything that involves it feels personal to her. She might play a song, but she's certainly not going to do a public services online at this point. So it's really critical that we can show that we are putting the users at the heart of this, that they are safe and they're secure, but we need to make sure we obviously do that. So more to be done on that.
Yeah, and I think from a local gov point of view, when I talk to the chief executives, there aren't any of them that don't say there's figures in their keep me awake at night list. It's usually where we aim because of all the data that we have, but also as Sally said, for people's confidence in using our services. So it's a double-edged sword, but also in the authorities, we talk a lot about cybersecurity and resisting the attack and thwarting people trying to access things, but actually we also know, and we all read the cyber magazines and the technology that says that these people are one step ahead, and you won't always be able to protect every single bit of your estate. So it's a balance for authorities. It's obviously with spending and understanding where they have to put their the biggest value. So there's a big bit for us of having to juggle protection against recovery. So if something bad happens, how do we recover? How do we bounce back quickly? We've seen some of those awful stories from local authorities in England. There's a couple of those real horror show stories where we're still on pen and paper a year after it happened. So there is so that's something as well that we also bake into that kind of cyber picture, is that if the worst happens, how do we recover quickly? What are those things that we have to do to make sure that we can still carry out the business that we need to do? So it's a bigger picture than just that security piece, and we are lucky in Wales that we do have the amazing resources in cyber at our hands, but it's not necessarily going to be the case that every authority has got a really, up to speed, top of the range cyber team embedded in this. So that's something that it really does feel like it's, there could be a bit more of a national response to some of the cyber stuff that's coming up, and how does that filter down into the authorities with the with what they can do and some of the options they've got for protecting themselves in different ways. But I think all of that is happening. I think there's an awful lot happening around cyber. It's certainly one of the most active areas in technology that I see across government. There's lots of information coming out, and I think the biggest worry is literally just how much it costs. So I think for me, it's expensive to do really well, which is when you start looking at risk more and maybe wavering, and then you also start thinking, I'm not going to put some more money in recovery for when it happens rather than if it happens.
I think that's a real good point about risk, and even kind of the financing or the funding, or how these things are funded. So, particularly think about some of my kind of sort of non-exec roles around, the move from kind of capex into kind of opex, in the sense of how do you finance this type of stuff. And also, I think in particular from a cyber resilience and preparedness perspective, is actually that balance between, there's a constant vigilance, constant in sort of improvement perspective about this thing's never done. So actually, how do you kind of acknowledge that, particularly from a corporate risk register perspective, but just to understand that actually it's not the IT people who are just responsible for this. There's a whole organizational approach and board awareness and visibility of some of this stuff. So, I think that's one of the things I've probably, in reflecting on your kind of comments around the kind of prominence and profile of digital, is how this sits at kind of C level as well. So, the kind of board's visibility and awareness of digital and its challenges and the kind of risk, but also it's how integral it is to kind of, it's not about having a digital strategy, that's your business strategy. So actually, how are you going to do, what kind of digital approaches are going to enable you to be successful in your business strategy, not just having a separate digital strategy that you then kind of look at nicely and think about in a wider context. I suppose I wanted to pick up maybe kind of Sam's point around, some of this stuff's expensive, but also we mentioned around skills and expertise and talent more generally. I think this isn't a Wales problem in general. I think this is a sector problem. This is certainly a UK-wide problem. But I think we probably wanted just to pick up on that education and skills piece in general. And I probably frame that a bit by, we've seen, and having been involved in this, the kind of huge opportunities around the new curriculum for Wales that was published in January 2020. So there's a massive changes into curriculum and qualifications coming in Wales from the kind of statutory kind of compulsory education piece. Obviously, what does that mean then for the range of post-compulsory routes? So, colleges, university, apprenticeships, and in particular, what does that mean for kind of those technical and sort of socio-technical roles and skill sets that we are probably wanting to encourage, because we desperately need them across different kind of public sector and private sector contexts. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on the kind of wider skills and talent piece, kind of where we see the gaps and the opportunities, and kind of, what are the kind of maybe some of the challenges being faced by yourself and your organisations and your colleagues at the moment. So maybe come to Sally first.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's one of the kind of three pillars of our organisation: skills and capability. We're not going to get any of this done if we don't have the people to do it. We're not going to get any of this done if we don't invest in the people we've got, and also invest in time and ensuring we've got a pipeline of people coming through. It's a big, massive worry. It's a big concern. It's not insurmountable, so that's good. But it's here, and there's a pressure now. In Wales, we have organisations like DVLA and ONS and IPO who are well into their digital journey, that have organisation structures and org designs that have lots of digital types of roles, and they pay well, and it's all very exciting. So already we've got competition within Wales for those digital types of skills to come into the Welsh public sector. But I think this is not a down thing, because I think there's a very good story to be told around what's happening in Wales. So I think we can kind of really start to talk up why it's exciting and good to come and work in the Welsh public sector. The work we've been looking at is, how do we provide skills and training for people existing in the Welsh public sector, and we're doing digital leadership skills, but also looking at courses around content design and various different professions within the digital data and technology space. But a huge amount of our work is also, as I think I said before, is working with universities and higher education and looking at the current curriculum. There's been a big change in the curriculum, absolutely, but still it's missing out other types of roles that I'm looking for when I go out to market. I want to, technology really great, we do need software engineers and we do need cyber people, but at the beginning I'm trying to find those types of skills that can help me understand and identify what the problem is we're trying to solve. So within our current curriculum we don't have, and it's for quite poor around user research or service design, etc. So that's where we are. That's fine. We'll be working with the universities. How can we influence that? How can we look at creating, when people are calling them digital apprenticeships, they're quite often technology apprenticeships, but how do we actually sort of have real live digital apprenticeships? And how do they, so we're doing a lot of pieces of work around with Sport Wales and Welsh Revenue Authority and all sorts of organisations. How can we then, which have multidisciplinary teams, how can we then bring in those digital apprentices and actually put them in on a live piece of work? Now that's good. That's where you learn. That's where you're going to be able to be supported as well. But actually, how do we start to integrate in these multidisciplinary teams, whether internships or graduates or apprenticeships, actually teaching them live, doing the job? I always never really wrap my head around a 4-year kind of digital degree, because it changes literally week by week. So we also need to be kind of be able to make sure that we are being kind of agile in the way we teach digital skills. And I really go back to saying, like, being able to create and design an organisation that is able to deliver in an internet age is as critical as being able to be a software engineer or to be able to be a content designer. They all need to be working together, because the shape and way we do things has changed, is changing, and we need to be looking forward. What's our workforce plans? Do we need all these ops people? Could we actually move them into different roles that are perhaps more interesting and really starting to get much more closer to the users of the services? So masses of work. There is work. There's the Brown report. I know that across health and local authorities are really looking at skills and capability. So the centre's not going to fix it all by any means, but we also what we would like to do is try and see the courses that are delivered. Can we have a consistency of language and a kind of a consistency of what we're talking about when we're talking about digital? So I'm hugely passionate about this. It's really fundamental to the centre, and we're doing a lot about it.
Sorry, rapidly trying to unmute. Yeah, Glyn, go for it.
I was waiting to see if you were going to pick Samurai, but I thought I'll just take the initiative. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with everything Sally just said, and the centre did some really good work on looking at the apprenticeships that are out there and how they're mapping across to the skills we need, and I think that will be a really important work to sort of inform the decisions we're making on apprenticeships. So we have got some government commitments around apprenticeships for the next end of the term, which gives us a real opportunity to make sure we're developing new learning pathways in digital and technology, and how can we use personal learning accounts to support digital skills development for people in work as well. So I think there's a huge amount to do here. We talk about it a lot because we're all sharing the same difficulties, in a sense, in the fact that how do we get access to these skills? We're all competing with each other. So we've just lost a senior civil servant to become the chief digital officer in Neathport Talbot. So all those things we just tend to take from each other, and we need to really build that supply chain of skills, as Sally suggested. And how can we link graduate programs better to organisations so they can develop this supply line? How can we between us share our capacity? But also, as you mentioned, Tom, the curriculum. How do we get schools engaged in this agenda? So as part of our engagement on the digital strategy, the Deputy Minister had a a really great session, which was set up by, I'm trying to think if it was Children in Wales or the Children's Commission, I can't remember, but it was with young people in school, and they had a lot of frustration around how the experience they had in school on digital, but also the sort of the offering, I guess, in terms of whether it's computer science, digital technology, whatever it would be. So we need to make sure that we're getting the curriculum embraced, and that we're pushing those kind of courses and pushing people onto GCSEs and A levels to help that platform going forward. And then, of course, we've got, as Sally mentioned, the Brown Review, the changing the future of work, what that means in terms of people's jobs, and how do we make sure that we give the people the opportunity to enhance their digital skills so they can excel in the workplace going forward, and what changes that. And we need to be able to be responsive to all of that. So it's a huge agenda. We touch on in the digital strategy, but this is one of the areas where we really want to set out a clear framework for digital skills in the future, and to make it easier for organisations, whether public sector or private sector, to understand where that supply line is, I guess. Thanks.
Sam, did you want to come in there for some of the comments around the kind of wider skills piece?
Yeah, sure. Really important within authorities where you've got people who have worked in traditional services, whose now businesses are now digital, and so we know we've got a huge element of upskilling and supporting of people around authorities to actually make that change as their service changes. And I think I spend most of my time saying, digital is just how we do business now. It's not a thing over there that you can say that's the digital team over there, and they're the people that do digital. It's actually every single person in the organisation now does digital, and it's not okay anymore to say, but I don't do digital, because you very much are by default doing that. But that's because we're in that kind of changeover bit of that generation where that's currently happening. When we plan for the future, we obviously don't want to be in that, because now we've got people coming through who are digital, they're born digital by default, effectively. But again, there is still quite a strong focus on the technology aspects, and still a strong focus on coding and the very, very technical things. Whereas what we're finding very much more is that we're losing, or we don't necessarily have as many of those kind of soft digital things, which actually are the hard bits to do quite often around user research, user experience design, service design, as Sally mentioned, content design. They're the bits we really miss, because they don't necessarily translate to something traditional. So it's quite hard to put your finger on how you get there from where you are now if you're in a very traditional role. So I think there's something around that kind of upskilling and working with people, and as Sally said, and as my team do, we get in there, get in amongst it, and show how you can do this differently and why it works better. But then there's also something from, again, I think Sally mentioned it, around how we fund these posts. There's very rigid structures around pay in the public sector, and in local authorities it's similar, and often we can't necessarily pay the levels that are required for people with lots of experience in these fields, but also we don't offer that entry level either. We don't offer. I think one of the authorities, Glyn has just offered its first kind of new digital apprenticeship, but that's not common across Wales and across local authorities, and we're not very good at offering those kind of foot in the door graduate type, come and work with us and learn your trade in a local authority, doing absolutely critical, meaningful work. You will change someone's life by working for us. And we don't sell that very well. What we look for is a big bang for our buck, and we're going to pay you average money, but we want 10 years experience for that. And it doesn't add up, frankly.
Thanks, Sam. I think that's a real challenge. I was just kind of thinking and also reflecting on a question from Lloyd Powell in the comments section around how can colleges and universities in Wales better support that? Because for example, we pump out Swansea and other universities in Wales pump out a lot of very good technical graduates. We're doing very well with computer science, and that's been the case with major initiatives like the Institute of Coding, like Technicamps. Like, there's lots of prominence and profile for this kind of stuff. But actually, is there awareness and visibility of these types of roles and responsibilities in the public sector? So, lots of people will naturally want to go to the southeast and work in a city and work for big tech companies, but perhaps they are unaware that NHS Wales Informatics Service or the new Digital Health and Social Care Wales are kind of there's big technical roles available. They can work in government, they can work in local government, and actually they can do data science in local government. They can do cybersecurity kind of roles, and I suppose it's the balance of their awareness and visibility of people who are 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. They're kind of they're looking for an apprenticeship. They've done their course at college. They've done their degree, and actually, how can we better use that kind of expertise and people at that early stage of their careers? Is there a role for various kind of governmental bodies to support that?
Just one thing on the relevance of courses. So as I understand it, the Software Academy in Cardiff and the Cyber Academy in University of South Wales, they've tried to do things differently, and they are bringing businesses so that the core of those courses are meeting business needs. And I think that's a really good example. And I know the Wales Data Nation Accelerator want to do that as well in terms of working with business to make sure that the data offer in terms of our skills provision is meeting the needs of the future economy. So I think if we could do more of that code design. Now, neither the software or the cyber academies address the issues Sally was talking about digital skills, but if we could do the same there in terms of content and digital as well. Just one reflection from me on apprentices. We've had 2 cohorts of digital apprentices coming to Welsh Government over the past 3 years, and each and every one of them are brilliant, and they come in with such passion and willingness to learn. And Welsh Government is it's a big organisation with lots of different career routes you can go down, and not everybody will necessarily stay in the profession they came in. But that's fine. If a digital apprentice comes in, learns about digital, and then goes off and works in a particular policy team, they are then advocates for digital ways of working. So yeah, I absolutely agree with Sam. The more we can bring in at an entry level with passion to embrace this as a career, but if they go off and do something else as well, they are spreading the word of digital.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And actually, I think Glyn, on that point, I can't remember who mentioned it earlier, but I think you probably all did in various ways around when we speak about the utility of data. Maybe it was Sam's comment around, big data as if this is the panacea for all problems. Actually, you want to be problem centered, but also you want to have data literate managers and policy officials, because it's not just about kicking it to the tech teams. I think you need to have that broader sort of data literacy, digital literacy, for want of a better phrase, and actually understanding about how technology can be used to solve problems across the entire profession. So I think actually if people go down a technical route and then perhaps go into a non-technical route, that's fantastic, because you're embedding that knowledge and understanding across the entire organisation. I think that's something we should positively encourage. And I know the wider DDAP work has really tried to encourage, Nesta have done some stuff with Lab at Cardiff University around embedding that kind of data-driven policy making across across government. But perhaps we need to do a bit more of that, and maybe there's a role for colleges and universities to support that. And I think that co-creation, code construction, particularly on Lloyd's kind of main comment there around sometimes it's quite hard to change programs at university and then to reap the benefits. But I think we don't want to fall into that either-or gap, particularly in the IT and software sector, where it's either you learn the hot new JavaScript front-end framework or you learn about formal methods and theory. It's not either-or. I think you need to have that balance of the kind of theoretical foundations as well as the industry relevance and currency for learning and applying those kind of technical skills. Very aware of time. I think we've managed to kind of zip through the time fairly well so far. We've probably got about 10 minutes left to kind of pick up some maybe some reflections. I just a kind of a signposting in now. I'd like to kind of come round to all of you towards the end to think about a couple of kind of challenges and opportunities as we go look ahead for the next, say, 12 to 18 months. So kind of where does that sit? But there's one other theme that I wanted to pick up that we kind of alluded to around accessibility, but perhaps something that's been quite framed quite clearly from a COVID context around things like digital poverty and data poverty, and the challenges we face around connectivity when we talk about accessing digital public services. I know lots of work is being done in Wales. We've got fantastic work from Digital Communities Wales, and there's lots of work in health and social care. And again, as we're talking about things like accessing services in the language of your choice. But I just wanted to kind of to hear some of your thoughts around the recognition of that wider sort of digital poverty, sort of data poverty challenge, and that's been very keenly felt in education, but how that sits more broadly across public services.
Should I go? Yeah. So it's really critical, and we'll go back to kind of the designing and delivering simple, easy to use services, and that includes that are as low in data as possible. I think one of the things we just need to do well in the public service is design and deliver really clear, simple services so people can get their job done. When they want to buy something or go on a holiday and or want to watch a video and this, that and the other, and they've got flashing bits and all sorts of other, that's not what government should be doing. We should just be making them really simple to use our services, so they come in, they get the service done, really low data usage, but just be simple and clear about what we want to do. So that's what we will strive for, and that's what will be covered in our service standards. The whole wider, broader issue around inclusion, obviously, we are wanting to design services that are simple and easy to use, that people want to use them. And that again goes back to the design of it, the accessibility of it, how people trust those services. So it's really critical, as I say, that it's a good design that people want to use, that they don't come in, have a really terrible experience and say, well, that's it, I'm not doing that anymore. We want them to go in and go like, oh, that was all right, actually, wasn't it? Okay, I might do that again. And I think there's kind of some interesting learnings that we'll have and will have. I've been speaking to the Children's Older Persons Commissioner's Office about the changing use of services for that particular group, for older persons. Did they have to use a service? Did they like it? Will they be using it again? I just not making assumptions that people in any particular groups don't want to use digital services. They quite often don't want to use them because they're absolutely awful. So let's improve them and hopefully kind of improve the gap between inclusion and being able to use digital services. But really importantly, going back to it, let's not design services that are going to eat all your data up, because it's unnecessary.
Thanks for raising this. So it was going to be one of the things I raised in my challenges, Tom, so you've already preempted that. But no, really, really important. And I think, on wider accessibility, if we really deliver on user-centered design, we will understand the barriers that people are facing far better than we've done before, and that will be whether they're digitally excluded or excluded for any other reason. And I think that's really, to me, in terms of our future generations' ways of working in Wales, our digital approach will really support organisations deliver services in a way that's in line with future generations' principles, and that's why it's also on our digital service standards. So in terms of design, that's important, but obviously you've raised a whole bunch of other stuff which we won't be able to cover in 8 minutes, around connectivity and data poverty and so on. And when we did our consultation on the digital strategy, 3 things came up. We've discussed skills already, connectivity and inclusion were the other things. So I could give you the line about connectivity being a reserve matter and all of that. However, that's not getting away from the fact that it is a major issue for people. And as you said, in terms of education, that was by the end of the second wave, that this was becoming a much well, there was much more noise around it. So we're working with DCMS on connectivity to try and work in partnership with them to sort of make sure that those gaps are filled. On digital inclusion, we set out a digital inclusion framework in December and reinforced this in the strategy in March. And one of the key things we've set up is just a bit of work looking at a minimum standard for digital in Wales. We're also doing a bit more work looking at data poverty. So we accept both of those things are things that have just gained in momentum over the past year, data poverty particularly. So yeah, yes, absolutely, it's a big challenge, and we will try and make some strides over the next few months on the back of those pieces of work.
Sam, do you want to quickly come in there?
Yeah. Very quickly, it was obviously of concern to local authorities in very specific ways as well. So we have the rural economy, which is has taken a hit around tourism and the issue around people necessarily not having their businesses spring back to life in those rural areas, but actually the lack of connectivity in some of them isn't enabling other businesses to start up in those areas that could. And we've got people leaving those areas and not being able to tempt younger people to stay in them, which is a real concern for authorities that have quite rural areas. And we were talking about it. We had a session yesterday just on that, and the I know influx is a word, but is outflux a word? If it isn't, I've just made it up, of people from those rural areas because they can't do the things they need to do in them. And then you have the flip side of that and the issues around data poverty. And actually they're in the much more municipal areas that tends to be a big issue. So they're in your nice big built up cities, but actually there are then pockets of poverty and deprivation and more seems to be more condensed in that area. So it's a real issue for across authorities in lots of different ways. All of the things that Sally and Glyn just said are they're shone a light on when you're looking at it from your own citizenship around you. So that they're massively on the list. I think it's now being able to understand and translate that into how we build and buy things in the future. And what the requirements are. So when you're doing your requirements and you're gathering, you're writing your use cases and your user stories, and you're trying to understand what it is you need to fix and what problem you're trying to solve. There are also these other things now that we massively need to bring into focus when we're doing that. And there are things like connectivity. Are they are they low data, as Sally was saying? Are they very simple to use? Are they sustainable? Are they what's the carbon footprint look like on it? There are much bigger things now to take into account when we're just actually getting our heads around in local government those use cases. There are this whole list of other things we need to take into account alongside that. And I think that slips into something that we're probably, or I would definitely put my hand up to, not being a brilliant customer. I'm a great customer actually when I go shopping, because I am brilliant because I will always buy more than I need. And actually that slips into procurement and how we buy things in government. And quite often are we buying the things we really need? We're not great customers, and we're not really good at explaining all of those things that we need. And so we then stamp our feet and say, we didn't get what we were expecting. And now those things are much wider. We need to be much better at that procurement piece, because it's not always for those, for our suppliers to tell us what we're missing. We have to be smart enough to say, thanks for that. Thanks for flagging that up and having that partnership type conversation with our suppliers. And so I think that's a really big element of how we will be able to achieve these things with connectivity, with data poverty, with better services, and all of those other things like decarbonisation, sustainability. I think it's all part of a really much bigger picture.
Thanks, Sam. I think you probably preempted or gazumped some of your kind of final. We're obviously now we've got a couple of minutes left, so I think we're going to zip round fairly quickly if we can do sort of 30-ish, kind of 45 seconds each, just to kind of say big challenges, big opportunities, kind of going forwards, and then I think we're perfectly timed to kind of wrap up this session. So happy to do the same order as we did before. So we'll go Glyn, Sally, and then Sam, and then I'll just close off the session. So over to you, Glyn.
Thanks. Yeah. So the big opportunity. Well, is it an opportunity challenge? Is opportunity centre, and I'll going to take Sally's thunder here. But getting that centre delivering this year and scaling up is just a massive opportunity for us to make a difference in this and to set the baseline for the future. So that's number one for me, and that's building on momentum. And again, I'm going to steal more of Sally's thunder because it's really important. The landscape review that we're doing through the centre. Sally's mentioned it briefly, but this will be a really important piece of work looking at public services at the moment, and where we need to focus our attention. So those two things, and then for me, it's the other. How to pick focus when we've got digital strategy with loads of things in it. But for me personally, if I can make a change on data and how we're using data, that would be a real opportunity for this year. The challenges we've discussed: inclusion, connectivity, and the understanding this agenda, skills. But I think cyber, as Sam said, the things that keep you awake at night, cyber is that threat. And it's a threat in so many ways, and as Sally said, it's also a threat to people's confidence in using digital services as well. So I think those are. Sorry, I've probably picked all of the challenges on behalf of everybody.
No, it's fine. Thank you. Thanks, Glyn. And over to Sally. Oh, you muted still. Sorry. We got one.
This is why I don't put myself on mute, because I always forget to turn it off. But I was just saying, don't worry, Glyn, I've always got loads of thunder backed up to no one can steal it all away from me. So just a couple of reflections for me. I'm picking up on Lloyd's point and something that I've said all the way through this. Can we really revisit our governance structures, our decision-making policies? How do we ensure that we're more agile and we've got more, we're able to be more responsive to the changes in whether it's the politics changes, or we have coronavirus, or there's a new way of doing things, the changes of what our users need. Really revisit those, because we broke a lot of those during COVID. Don't go back to them, learn from them, and try and streamline the organisations a bit better, and ensure that we're not delivering out of date courses or services. Really kind of look at that again. And my second thing is sort of picking up what Sam was talking about. When we talk about the ecosystem, it really includes our suppliers and our SMEs. We want more Welsh businesses to be working with us and responding to our tenders and winning the work. We want more Welsh businesses to be on the digital marketplace. We want you to know about it. We want to make sure that you know how to get yourself front and forward on that digital marketplace. And when you respond to procurements, that you're doing it because it's quite hard to do, but learn about it, bring in experts to help you be able to respond better, because we want you to be working with us. We got a session that's going to be set up in the next few weeks with the economy team and our procurement teams. Look out for it on digitalpublicservices.gov.uk. Wales will also tweet about it. We're going to come together and talk about what it is that we're looking for in the marketplace, what we're looking for now, the types of roles we're looking for, and our user research have talked about that, but also to be able to start to be far more transparent about our pipeline of work that's coming up, so you can prepare and we can prepare and we can do more business together. Can be done.
Lovely, thank you, Sally. And then over to Sam.
We've got my area's got three main focuses for the next sort of 18 months. The first one is data and the better use of it, unlocking it, solving those problems, because we just need to get better at it. The second one is around skills and capability, and what does Wales and Wales local authorities, what does that look like in the next 2-3 years? What capabilities and what skills are we missing that we now need to make sure we're supporting? So we've got organisations for the future, and we need to make those decisions and those changes and bring people in now to prepare them for that. So that's not something you can put on the back burner and say we don't need it now, because we do. And then the third thing is around human-centered design. So that's not necessarily the really kind of specific user-centered design, but it's around looking at the whole citizen and their life and their interactions with us, and just moving away from looking at them as a series of transactions, but looking at them as a whole person and a whole family that has needs and needs support. And if there's things we can do to intervene before they have issues, then intervention is always better than remediation, and actually it's much cheaper as well. So those are the three main things for us. We're very committed on those three things, and we will be using all of the support we can get from Glyn, Health, and Sally to help us achieve that across Wales.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to my panel. This has been a fantastic session. We've covered a lot of different areas and a lot of kind of different topics. I think reaffirms and reiterates the promise and opportunity for Wales. It is an exciting place to be, both in the UK and in international contexts. I think it's an exciting place to work, an exciting place to do research, exciting place to start and grow a business. And I think that wider some of the speakers and the presentations over Wales Tech Week really kind of exemplify that, as and even as the First Minister said on Monday, to kind of open up this wider session. So, Dr. Valerian, thank you very much. It's been great speaking with you three. So thank you very much to Sam, Sally and Glyn, and look forward to speaking to you again soon. And thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. Rewatch all of our sessions online. Thank you to our partners.